From hush money and sexual charges to corruption and abuse of power, here's a look at 7 presidents who got caught doing nasty business. Starting off with one of the most controversial figures in recent history, Donald Trump. The 45th President of the United States has faced numerous legal and ethical challenges throughout his career, but none as salacious as the hush money and sexual misconduct allegations. In 2018, the world was rocked by the news that Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen paid $130,000 to adult film actress Stormy Daniels just days before the 2016 presidential election. The payment was allegedly made to keep Daniels silent about an affair she claimed to have had with Trump back in 2006. But that wasn't the only hush money scandal Trump was involved in. Playboy model Karen McDougal also alleged that she had an affair with Trump in 2006 and was paid $150,000 by American Media Incorporated to keep her story from going public. The practice known as catch and kill aimed to buy exclusive rights to her story and then bury it. These payments led to a flurry of legal issues for Trump, including campaign finance violations. Michael Cohen, who facilitated the payments, was sentenced to 3 years in prison, admitting that he made the payments at the direction of Trump. But the controversies didn't end there. Trump has also faced numerous allegations of sexual misconduct, with over 24 women accusing him of unwanted advances, groping, and worse. These allegations span several decades, painting a troubling picture of the former president's behavior towards women. Despite these serious allegations, Trump has consistently denied any wrongdoing, dismissing the accusations as politically motivated and claiming the women were lying. However, the hush money payments and the sheer number of allegations have undeniably cast a long shadow over his presidency and personal reputation. Moving on to another high-profile figure, let's talk about Silvio Berlusconi, the media mogul and former Prime Minister of Italy, whose time in office was marred by scandal, controversy, and most disturbingly, minors. Silvio Berlusconi, who served as Italy's Prime Minister in 3 non-consecutive terms, was no stranger to scandal. While his political career was filled with allegations of corruption and bribery, it was his personal life that grabbed the most headlines. Berlusconi's infamous bunga bunga parties became a symbol of his hedonistic lifestyle and disregard for the law. In 2010, Berlusconi faced one of his most notorious scandals when he was accused of paying for sex with Karima El Maroug, a Moroccan nightclub dancer known by her stage name Ruby Rubaquari, or Ruby the Heart Stealer. The issue was not just the alleged payment, but also the fact that Ruby was only 17 at the time, making the transaction potentially illegal under Italian law. Berlusconi denied the allegations, claiming he thought Ruby was the niece of former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, and that he was merely helping her out of a tough situation. Despite his protests, the scandal escalated, leading to a sensational trial in 2011 where Berlusconi was charged with abuse of power and engaging in unimaginable activities with a minor. In 2013, he was initially convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison and banned from holding public office. However, Berlusconi appealed the decision, and in 2014, the conviction was overturned by Italy's highest court, citing insufficient evidence to prove he knew Ruby's true age. But the damage was already done. The bunga bunga parties, involving numerous young women, and allegedly featuring explicit entertainment, became a permanent stain on Berlusconi's legacy. He faced additional accusations of paying off witnesses and participants to keep quiet about the nature of these gatherings. Berlusconi's flamboyant lifestyle, coupled with his legal troubles, turned his political career into a soap opera filled with courtroom drama and salacious revelations. Despite all the controversies, Berlusconi managed to remain a significant figure in Italian politics until his death in 2023, but his legacy will always be shadowed by the scandals that defined his time in office. Now let's turn to Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, whose tenure was plagued by serious allegations of corruption and ties to drug trafficking. From being the saint sent to salvage the situation in Honduras to becoming the dealer. Here is the disturbing truth. Juan Orlando Hernandez served as president of Honduras from 2014 to 2022. Despite his claims of fighting corruption and drug trafficking, his presidency became synonymous with these very issues. The most significant and damning allegations against Hernandez emerged from U.S. federal courts, painting a grim picture of his involvement in the drug trade. In 2019, Hernandez's brother, Tony Hernandez, a former Honduran congressman, was convicted in the United States on drug trafficking charges. During Tony Hernandez's trial, Prosecutors alleged that Juan Orlando Hernandez had accepted millions of dollars in bribes from drug traffickers, including the notorious Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. These funds were allegedly used to finance Hernandez's political campaigns and to maintain power. The allegations didn't stop there. U.S. prosecutors described Hernandez as a co-conspirator in his brother's drug trafficking operations. They claimed that Hernandez facilitated the smuggling of tons of cocaine into the United States and ensured protection for drug traffickers in exchange for hefty bribes. Hernandez vehemently denied these accusations, asserting that they were part of a conspiracy by his political enemies and drug lords to undermine his presidency. Despite his denials, the evidence presented in U.S. courts was compelling. In March 2021, Tony Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the drug trafficking scheme, further implicating Juan Orlando Hernandez and increasing pressure on him. After Hernandez left office in January 2022, his legal troubles escalated. In February 2022, the United States requested his extradition to face charges related to drug trafficking and weapons offenses. Honduran authorities arrested him shortly after, marking a dramatic fall from grace for the former president. In April 2022, Hernandez was extradited to the U.S., where he now faces trial. The charges against Hernandez include participating in a conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States, using firearms in furtherance of drug trafficking crimes, and conspiracy to use destructive devices. If convicted, Hernandez could face a life sentence, adding a grim chapter to his controversial political career. Let's turn to Nicolas Sarkozy, the former president of France, whose political career has been overshadowed by multiple legal troubles and scandals. Nicolas Sarkozy served as president of France from 2007 to 2012. Known for his dynamic and sometimes controversial style, Sarkozy's presidency was marked by several scandals, but none as serious as the allegations of corruption and illegal campaign financing. One of the most significant scandals erupted in 2012, when allegations surfaced that Sarkozy's 2007 presidential campaign had received illicit funds from Libya's then-leader, Muammar Gaddafi. These accusations were based on claims that Sarkozy's campaign was illegally funded by millions of euros in cash from the Gaddafi regime. Sarkozy has vehemently denied these allegations, calling them grotesque and a manipulation. In 2018, Sarkozy was taken into police custody and questioned for 2 days regarding these allegations. The investigation is still ongoing, and the scandal continues to cast a long shadow over his legacy. This case has been particularly damaging, not only because of the serious nature of the accusations, but also because of Sarkozy's high-profile international standing during his presidency. Another major legal battle Sarkozy faced was related to the so-called Big Malian affair, where he was accused of overspending on his 2012 re-election campaign and using fake invoices to cover it up. French law imposes strict limits on campaign spending, and it was alleged that Sarkozy's campaign had exceeded these limits by millions of euros. In 2021, Sarkozy was found guilty of illegal campaign financing and sentenced to 1 year in prison. Sarkozy has appealed the verdict, maintaining his innocence. Adding to his legal woes, Sarkozy was also convicted in 2020 for corruption and influence peddling in a separate case. He was found guilty of attempting to bribe a judge in exchange for information on another investigation into his campaign finances. For this, Sarkozy received a 3-year sentence, with 2 years suspended. He has also appealed this conviction. Sarkozy's legal troubles have significantly tarnished his reputation and overshadowed his political achievements. Despite his continued denial of all allegations and convictions, these scandals have painted a picture of a leader willing to bend the rules for personal and political gain. Let's turn our attention to Mauricio Funes, the former president of El Salvador, whose presidency became synonymous with corruption and legal troubles. Mauricio Funes served as the president of El Salvador from 2009 to 2014. His election was historic, marking the first time in 2 decades that a leftist candidate from the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, FMLN, won the presidency. However, his legacy has been marred by serious allegations of corruption and financial misconduct. In the years following his presidency, Funes faced numerous investigations into his financial dealings while in office. The most significant scandal scandal emerged in 2016 when he was accused of embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars from public funds. Salvadoran authorities alleged that Funes and his associates diverted over $350 million from state coffers, funneling the money into private accounts and using it to pay for personal luxuries, including properties, vehicles, and lavish vacations. The accusations against Funes led to a warrant for his arrest on charges of embezzlement, illicit enrichment, and money laundering. However, by the time the charges were filed, Funes had already fled to Nicaragua, where he was granted political asylum by President Daniel Ortega. Funes claimed that the charges against him were politically motivated, but the evidence presented by Salvadoran prosecutors painted a damning picture of widespread corruption and financial mismanagement. Adding to his legal woes, in 2018, the Salvadoran Supreme Court ordered the seizure of Funes's assets, including properties and bank accounts, as part of an effort to recover the embezzled funds. Despite these actions, Funes remained in Nicaragua, out of reach of Salvadoran authorities. In 2019, further allegations surfaced when Funes was linked to a bribery scheme involving a major construction company. Prosecutors claimed that Funes had accepted bribes in exchange for awarding government contracts, further highlighting the extent of his corrupt practices while in office. Funes' case has drawn significant attention both in El Salvador and internationally, serving as a stark example of how political leaders can exploit their positions for personal gain. Despite his claims of innocence and political persecution, the weight of the evidence against him has left a lasting stain on his legacy. Now let's examine the controversial presidency of Pedro Castillo, the former president of Peru, whose short tenure was marked by political turmoil and disturbing corruption allegations. Pedro Castillo, a former school teacher and union leader, became president of Peru in July 2021 after a hotly contested election. His victory was seen as a win for the rural and impoverished communities of Peru, promising significant reforms and an end to corruption. However, Castillo's presidency quickly became embroiled in scandal and controversy. From the outset, Castillo faced intense opposition from various political factions, leading to a highly unstable administration. Within months of taking office, his government was plagued by allegations of corruption and nepotism. Several members of his cabinet and close advisors were accused of involvement in corrupt activities, including accepting bribes and embezzling public funds. One of the most significant scandals involved Castillo's former prime minister, Guido Bellido, who faced accusations of corruption and links to illegal mining operations. Bellido's tenure was short-lived, and his departure was seen as an attempt by Castillo to quell growing public discontent and restore confidence in his administration. However, the allegations against Bellido and other officials continued to haunt Castillo's presidency. In 2022, further allegations emerged when prosecutors opened an investigation into Castillo himself, accusing him of obstructing justice by allegedly interfering with investigations into his allies. Castillo denied any wrongdoing and claimed that the accusations were part of a political conspiracy against him. The constant scandals and political infighting severely hampered Castillo's ability to govern effectively. His approval ratings plummeted, and mass protests erupted across the country, with citizens demanding his resignation and an end to corruption. Despite attempts to reshuffle his cabinet and address the allegations, the controversies continued to mount. In December 2022, amidst growing pressure and calls for his removal, Castillo was impeached by the Peruvian Congress on grounds of moral incapacity. He was accused of failing to address the corruption within his administration and allowing his allies to engage in unethical practices. The impeachment marked a dramatic end to his presidency, which had lasted less than 2 years. Following his impeachment, Castillo continued to assert his innocence, claiming that his removal was orchestrated by powerful political and economic interests opposed to his reform agenda. Nevertheless, his downfall highlighted the deep-seated issues of corruption and political instability in Peru. Pedro Castillo's turbulent presidency serves as a stark reminder of the challenges faced by leaders who pledge to combat corruption but find themselves engulfed by it. His story underscores the importance of maintaining integrity and transparency in governance to truly effect change. Next up, let's turn our attention to Jacob Zuma, the former president of South Africa, whose time in office was riddled with allegations of corruption and sexual misconduct. Jacob Zuma, who served as president from 2009 to 2018, has a long history of legal troubles and controversies. One of the most prominent and damaging scandals during his presidency was his trial for rape in 2006. The case revolved around allegations made by Fezekile Ntsukela Kuzwayo, known as Kwezi, who accused Zuma of raping her at his home in Johannesburg. Zuma, a former anti-apartheid activist and high-ranking member of the African National Congress, ANC, admitted to having consensual sex with Kwesi, but denied the rape allegations. The trial was highly publicized and deeply polarized South African society. During the trial, Zuma's defense team questioned Kwesi's credibility and portrayed her as promiscuous. The case also highlighted controversial aspects of Zuma's personal beliefs, including his admission that he took a shower after sex with Kwesi to reduce the risk of contracting HIV, a statement that drew widespread ridicule and criticism for its ignorance about HIV transmission. In 2006, Zuma was acquitted of the charges, but the trial left a lasting impact on his reputation and cast a shadow over his political career. Despite his acquittal, many South Africans remained skeptical of Zuma's innocence, and the case became a symbol of the broader issues of gender-based violence and misogyny in the country. Zuma's troubles didn't end with the trial. His presidency was plagued by numerous corruption scandals, the most notable being the Nkandla scandal, where he was accused of using around $23 million of public funds for upgrades to his private residence under the guise of security improvements. In 2016, South Africa's Constitutional Court ruled that Zuma had violated the constitution by failing to repay the money, leading to a significant political fallout. Additionally, Zuma's close ties with the controversial Gupta family led to accusations of state capture, where the family allegedly wielded undue influence over government appointments and contracts. These allegations further tarnished his presidency and fueled widespread public outrage. Despite surviving several no-confidence votes and intense political pressure, Zuma eventually resigned in 2018, succumbing to mounting calls for his departure from within his own party, the ANC. Finally on our list is the scandalous downfall of Park Geun-hye, the former president of South Korea, whose presidency was shattered by a massive corruption scandal. Park Geun-hye, who served as South Korea's first female president from 2013 to 2017, experienced one of the most dramatic falls from grace in modern political history. Her presidency, which initially promised stability and economic growth, ended in scandal and imprisonment. The scandal erupted in late 2016 when reports surfaced that Park's close confidant, Choi Soon-sil, had been exerting undue influence over government affairs despite holding no official position. Choi was accused of using her connection with Park to extort millions of dollars from South Korean conglomerates, including Samsung and Lotte, funneling the funds into private foundations she controlled. As details of the scandal emerged, it became clear that Choi had been deeply involved in state matters, including editing presidential speeches and influencing appointments. The public was outraged by the extent of Choi's influence and Park's apparent willingness to allow it. Massive protests erupted across South Korea, with millions of citizens taking to the streets demanding Park's resignation. The pressure from the public and political opponents led to Park's impeachment by the National Assembly in December 2016. In March 2017, South Korea's Constitutional Court unanimously upheld the impeachment, officially removing Park from office. She was arrested shortly afterward on charges of bribery, abuse of power, and coercion. The subsequent trial was highly publicized, and in April 2018, Park was found guilty of corruption and sentenced to 24 years in prison, along with a multi-million-dollar fine. The court found that Park had colluded with Choi to receive bribes from major corporations and had abused her presidential power to support Choi's private interests. Park's conviction and imprisonment marked a significant moment in South Korea's history, symbolizing a strong stance against corruption at the highest levels of government. Despite her denials and claims of political victimization, the evidence presented during her trial painted a damning picture of her presidency. Park Geun-hye's scandal serves as a stark reminder of how personal connections and corruption can undermine even the highest office, leading to a dramatic and ignominious end to a political career. This concludes our deep dive into the presidents who got caught doing nasty business. From hush money and sexual charges to corruption and abuse of power, these leaders' stories highlight the far-reaching consequences of scandal and misconduct in the political arena.